Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Shri Zakir, Dean of the Carlson School of Management, and I'm so happy to welcome you all to another First Tuesday. For 29 years, we've been bringing together Minnesota's business community to hear from top executives on the pressing issues that they're facing, whether in business or in leadership. We're so happy to have expanded our speaker series to our global community as well, and I thank all of you across the world who are joining in today. Before we move to our program, I would like to recognize our longtime sponsors, our corporate and media sponsors, which are Wells Fargo and Twin Cities Business. And of course, a very, very special thank you to the many, many Carlson School and University of Minnesota supporters who are in our audience. As many of you know, we recently completed the Driven campaign, where the Carlson School raised over $190 million from so many supporters, close to 10,000 supporters, for the support of students and faculty and experiential learning and the modernization of our facilities. The support of our donors has helped Carlson become one of the top business schools in the world, and we count on your continued support to be even better. For those who've given in the past and those who choose to give in the future, a big, big thank you. Today, we are joined by our featured speaker, Jay Debertin, for a fireside chat. Jay Debertin has been president and CEO of CHS, and he's been president and CEO since 2017. And he's actually worked with CHS since 1984. CHS is a farmer-owned cooperative focused on agronomy, energy, grains, and food. And it's one of the largest agribusiness companies in the US and the fifth largest business in Minnesota on the Fortune 500 list. Since becoming the CEO at CHS, Jay has focused on improving operational excellence, strengthening the company's financial performance, and growing the company's core businesses. In previous roles, Jay served as the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of CHS Energy and Processing and Food Ingredients. Jay is a Minnesota native with strong connections to the region. He received his bachelor's degree from the University of North Dakota, Grand Forks, and his MBA from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He also serves on several boards, and he's on the boards of Securian Financial and Visitation High School, and he previously also served on the Minnesota Opera Board. So everyone, please welcome Jay.
Thank you, Shri. Thank you very much. It's just my delight to be here and be with all of you.
Thanks, Jay. I think let's get started with the questions right away. I just wanted to, I know many in the audience don't know a whole lot about CHS. So could you tell us a little bit more about CHS? And, for those in the audience who may not know that much about the company?
I would love to. And let me just say what a privilege it is to be with all of you today. As the dean introduced me with a lovely introduction, I did go to school up at University of North Dakota and then continued at the University of Wisconsin, so kind of surrounded the University of Minnesota. So it's all the more of a privilege to be with all of you. So CHS, large, complex, complicated company. We're the largest cooperative in North America, about 10,000 employees spread across the globe. However, our business model is really straightforward. What you should think about when you think about CHS and what we do is we provide the products and services to plant an acre of ground. Then during the course of a growing season, we provide products and services to that as that acre of ground matures. And then at harvest, which we're at the doorstep of here right now, we buy the products off that acre of ground. And of those products, we process some of them ourselves. We process some of them in partnership with others. And the rest we ship to customers around the world. So that's the business model really in a nutshell. We really focused around the acre of ground and providing food to people.
Recording in progress.
Some other things that you might see about us in that rings closer to home for some of you, at least up in the Midwest, where you see the Cenex brand when you're going to your lake place or traveling out in the rural areas. That's our energy side of the company. Many times being used at companies that own us, called local cooperatives. So that would be a kind of a brand that you would see. But when it comes to food products on the shelf, we don't go that far. We really stop at selling to processors who then goes to the shelf. But our own company, frankly, it's just knowing who we are and the skill sets we have and what we're good at. And we found that that's where we kind of think that we can really succeed at. Very purpose-driven company, very purpose-driven companies. So we think about the purpose in our case of creating connections to empower agriculture. And we really take that to heart of how do we create connections for the people that own us with, frankly, people around the world that depend on the food and the products that the people that own us produce. You know, Shri, I have an example that really, brings that purpose home. It did to me personally. So I've been with the company for 38, almost 38 years now. About 20 years ago, I went on the board of directors of a company, a very successful foods company that we and a Japanese trading house owned together, that's located out in California by the name of Ventura Foods. And when I went on this board 20 years ago, I was a young executive at the company, and I remember speaking to an executive for this Japanese trading house, and kind of asking him, why do you have this joint venture with this farm co-op? You're incredible, one of the largest companies on the planet. You have lots of resources. Why do you have this joint venture with us? And at the time we were a smaller company and so forth. And his answers really struck with me, and they made a difference on me. But his answer really started with, Jay, you will never understand. Which, when you hear that as an answer, you take a little bit of offense to it, frankly. You think, well, I think I'm capable of understanding. But he wasn't really kidding. He said, I don't think you'll really understand. And so what he went on to say is, you are owned directly by farmers. And I said, yes, we are. And he said, that puts you at CHS kind of one click or two clicks closer to the food and to the crops, because you are owned directly by farmers. And he said, what you will never understand is, for those countries that are dependent on others for food, it's just a different thing. And the importance of the relationships and the importance of the people we do business with is just of a different nature. And Shri and I are sitting right now in the Twin Cities area. It's a beautiful autumn day. I'm located in the St. Paul side of the Twin Cities. And if we got in our car and drove maybe just 10 miles south of here, and pulled over, we would probably see combines and harvesters going full out today. And in what we could see from our car, probably would feed a city, in just what we could see from our car. So those of us here in the United States, we don't experience that, because we are so self-sufficient on food production, and in fact, export so much, that I think that gentleman was right. I don't think I will ever quite get it the way I would if we were a country that was dependent on others for food, because we just haven't kind of grown up that way and operate that way. And so obviously his words stuck with me, but it's just very, very, very impactful. So we build those connections that really benefit the people that own us and benefit the people around the world. And that's our purpose. And that's what we do. And we think a lot of that work, it matches the values of the people that are joining us. It matches many University of Minnesota graduates that have joined us over the years in lots of different ways. And have just found that with the people joining the workforces today that want to be purposeful, purpose-driven, we have no problem working on that.
Yeah, what better purpose than to feed the world? And I just love this, your purpose of creating connections to empower agriculture. So it's just, I mean, the connections piece, your connections to the farmers. I think that's what your Japanese, partner was so excited about. And I think that's something that, all of us, I think more and more want to see those connections, and we want to know that there is the farmer is benefiting from what you do, and is also that the farmer, and we're grateful to that farmer for, providing us with this, that what we need to survive. So I think that's just a wonderful purpose to have in mind. And, it's, I love too, your focus on that, that 1 acre, how do you kind of make sure that, you get the best out of it? And it's, you put the best into it. And agriculture is so much an essential industry. And it's one that, again, I think many of, especially the younger generation, is so concerned about, and maybe as in us in the older generation should be more concerned about, and that's the impact of climate change, as well as, the political issues around trade. It's both climate change and trade. There are just so many factors going into, the discussions about agriculture right now. So what do you see as some of the most challenging issues in agriculture right now? What is the state of agriculture in our country?
Yeah, it's as you can imagine, Sri, I mean, just a lot in your question there, because everything you said is absolutely true, and everything you said really we could take off on and discuss at time. I think I'll just maybe take your question kind of both narrow and broad. In a narrow sense, the state of agriculture today is good. We've got strong global demands. We've really had some trade issues that frankly are working a bit better than they were just a few years ago. And we're just seeing, kind of those routes operate much more market-based, which is, frankly, something we work hard towards promoting is let the commodities flow and let the markets kind of choose and draw where they should. And when governments and other groups kind of step in and interrupt that and cause us to operate a bit suboptimally, it causes a lot of issues for us. And we're really seeing maybe a window right now compared to some past years where things are operating pretty well. And it has led to some higher commodity prices. We've also got a drought underway in lots of our areas, which has also contributed to that. But it's letting markets work without some of the heavy hand of governments. And it's an operating model that's good for agriculture. But to your point, it is an essential industry. And we can say, well, of course, we've got to eat. But when we just think about that, not only for ourselves, but for a world, and much of a world that still lives on, $10 a day, how do the things that are produced right here work and compete across the world? In a wider sense, that's where I think, things like the climate change and the things that are going to impact our agricultural development, both here in the United States and around the world. Shri, I think if you give me one word that I would rely upon when I think about many of these things, it would be the word adapt. We've got to be able to adapt to the world as it will be, and the conditions that we will need to operate under. And I think we've got to be able to learn and to grow into those new ways of doing business. So as an industry, my point and CHS's point is, we can't pushback on many of the steps that we as a world and we as a country need to take around things like climate change. I just don't think it's a winning hand. I don't think that at the end of the day that it will put you, your company, or your industry in the best position. In fact, I would more argue that I think you will be removed from the discussion one way or another, and decisions will get made without you in attendance. So therefore, my point is, I don't think it can be defensive, but I think the needle that's going to be hard to thread, frankly, is how to talk about answers and solutions and ramifications to these complex issues without appearing defensive. That's going to be the trick, because solutions to complex problems many times are complex solutions. I mean, if they were simple solutions, I'd argue it's probably not a very complex problem. Most solutions to complex problems have pros and cons. They have things that favor, they have things that disfavor. They have ramifications that are good, positive, they have some that are negative. And I think climate opportunities and solutions really will have many of those same attributes. Have positive attributes that we should pursue, but also are going to have some negative ramifications that we also have to endure. Mm-hmm. And that type of discussion is not easy right now. Right. It's not easy right now to have those two-sided, I'll call it more intellectually honest discussions on the table. Is a challenge without somebody being accused of you're just being defensive, or somebody else being accused that you're not thinking about, the whole idea that you're describing. And I don't think that furthers good intellectual kind of decision making, as opposed to just the ideas of the day. So if you think about carbon impact on farmers and carbon impacts on companies like CHS, I think clearly the world is moving up on that curve. It's moving up on that curve. I don't think it'll be a linear approach. I think administrations will come and go and policymakers will come and go. So we may move at an uneven pace, but we are moving up on the curve. So one of the ways that agriculture can participate in that is with our farming practices. And there's many things you could pick on that, but one of which is kind of no-till farming, which just means fewer passes over the field and kind of leaving the ground undisturbed, that can kind of keep trapped carbon in the ground. A lot of acres are in what's called no-till today. But the fact is the acres that are in there today, in a certain sense, don't count, because they're in the calculations today. They're in the emissions today. They are looked at as a carbon sink today. So if we're going to move the needle and do more, then one solution that's being discussed is, do we put more acres into no-till? And the example that I'm using on this is that very well could be a route we should take. Could be. But many of those acres, the yield will be impacted, or the results of production will be impacted negatively by dealing with that ground in that fashion. So how do we think about that? How do we think about that? Do we think about compensating the farmer for that lost productivity? Do we think about higher food prices that might come with less production? And so I use as an example of, we need to work towards solutions, we need to work towards those answers, and we need to have all the facts, as many of the facts as we can anyway, up on the table. But when it comes to things like the country's energy strategy or the country's food strategy, right now, our strategy as a country, I would argue, with energy can really be summed up into the single word of cheap. 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 And if that is our only strategy around things like energy, that's a problem, because many of the solutions will not support the word cheap. Now that there's also an outlier there, as new technology will also come into play, and that will be a game changer in certain areas. But at least with some technologies, we think about it today, that we've got to think about solutions and think about strategies that can't be summed up in the word cheap. From a food perspective, really the country works on, I'll say, two words: safe and cheap. And so I think these steps that we talk about taking, and I use one example, but we could think of several others, really need to be considered at the same time, as not all those steps will lead to cheap as we have thought about them.
That's right. I mean, I agree. I mean, there's pros and cons to everything that we do. There are costs and benefits, and sometimes they're not evenly shared across different folks. I mean, at some level, we want to do something about, climate change and global warming, because that also affects farmers and what they can grow,
Absolutely.
where they can grow it, all of that. It's something that, does impact them. But at a macro level, it impacts everybody. But at the same time, it's, as you say, some of these activities can have short-term deleterious impacts on, people, farmers' incomes, or, or other, just yields and availability and the cost of food. So there's just, you're absolutely right that these are not simple problems, they're complex problems. And they really need people to come across to talk about these issues in a very honest way, as you mentioned.
Yes,
and come to some solutions.
I agree 100%. And they say the needle that's hard to thread is how to have these kind of, I'll call it more intellectually open discussions about pros, cons, effects, impacts, without appearing defensive, without appearing that you're against the step. But I just think intellectually, that's the way I think good decisions are made, in all parts of our life, right? We end up with not sure things. There's always risk, but better ones, I believe.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's a thoughtful approach that needs to be taken, and that needs everyone to be at the table and, and discussing these issues in a way that, makes sense. And I don't know, I think maybe universities can play a role in that, just acting as conveners, neutral conveners, to bring people together to discuss these issues. But
Sri, I think your point is a good one, because some of the organizations that, frankly, we've looked to, to set policy and do so in a way that does make sure that, okay, we've considered lots of ideas and areas and impacts. Some of those aren't working very well right now. They're really not working very well right now. And yet these problems are serious and they're important, and we need to take good steps.
Right.
So I think the world might think about your idea of, can academia play a bigger role?
It's a great idea, and one we'll certainly think about, and as we just go forward. So thank you for that. And I would also like to know, I mean, in this sort of future where there is a lot, you mentioned the word adapt.
Yeah.
And we've all had to adapt. We've adapted in this past 1.5 years like you wouldn't believe. And going forward, again, I think your farmers are going to need to have to adapt. The industry is going to have to need to adapt, and consumers too may have to need to adapt to higher prices if what they want is really a sustainable agricultural practices and so on. So, but what are you doing at CHS to prepare for this? This uncertain future. How does CHS going to sort of navigate this future?
Yeah, so we're just really jazzed about the future in so many ways at CHS, and in some challenging ways, but ways with just great kind of great opportunities. We start with the fact that, we're a company and an industry that works in commodities. And so therefore we stay quite humble because these markets can move in ways that, you do your best to stay with them, but this is not an industry that is easy to be thought of as the smartest person in the room, because the markets and the impacts in the markets are global, and they've been driven by lots of things around the world, some of which we know about, some of which we don't, but all of which we have to deal with in the products that we do. So we kind of start with, a fair amount of humility in terms of how we approach our businesses and our knowledge, but we also are beginning with some very ambitious goals for CHS, just in this world that we are in, Shri, because notwithstanding anything we've talked about, I mean, the idea that companies don't have to also look at how do they operate and how they are doing business, frankly, can they be rewarded? Can they be optimal in the way they are currently doing business? And in some respects at CHS, we said the answer is no. We need to transform some ways that we do business, particularly across our company, in ways that we think will drive cost out of our supply chain, not just for the purpose of increasing profits, but we think that will come with it, but also as a way to be a tighter link to create these connections. So let me just give you an example. When we have buyers from China coming into the market and buying soybeans, we want to think about and operate in a way that when that buyer is into the market buying soybeans, we are at the same time talking to the farmers that own us to deliver soybeans into one of our facilities where we have a unit train there ready to load. And then 2 days later, it is at our port facilities. And at that day, we bring a vessel into berth and we load. And as soon as we're loading, that vessel is released. Now that's a really high bar in terms of that kind of coordination. But that's anything other than that, essentially efficient of a way, leads to cost. And there's only one way we recover that, and that's what we either pay or charge for. And the more we can operate those systems cleanly and that efficiently, the way I just described it, which admittedly is a high bar, is not as well as we can do. So we are working hard. We have 10,000 people working hard at raising our game on how we operate across our businesses, how we operate with each other, how we work with customers around the world and what they need. And what we've seen in 2021 really has given us it's just really built up momentum in us, because in 2021, we've never moved as much grain in our system in the history of the company. And that history spans 90 years. And we did it in ways that our market share hasn't been higher. We did it at the lowest cost that we've seen ever. And it's really kind of whet our appetite of what it can be and what it can do. But it takes concerted effort. It cannot be just words like we need to do better. It needs to be hard plans with the right people around tables, and then holding people accountable to actually do what they say. And and it's really leading into to some interesting areas. And I don't want to lose sight from just kind of operational ways that we think about this too. We have trucks on the road. We have a lot of trucks on the road, and between our Fairmont, Minnesota location and our Mankato, Minnesota location, we move 90 truckloads a day of soybean oil from one plant to the other plant. So we're working on driverless technology. and how can we operate with this, a single truck that's got a person in it and followers that don't. Technology that the military had worked on for years. So it's steps like that also that we think about, how can we operate better as a company? How can we be better tomorrow than we are today? And I'd also just say, just things like market access is also very much in our mind. We can hear, and I hear that the U.S. can't rely just on China, which is a true statement. However, they're a pretty big part of the world, and they're going to be a big part of the world. Earlier this week, I read a note by Eurasia that described companies doing business in China, saying 10% of those companies saw a way of decoupling from China, 50% saw a way of kind of their business probably being status quo, and 40% saw it increasing. So the idea that we can kind of back off, I think that's, there's not a big enough world out there to replace them.
Right. Yeah, they're 1/6 of the world's population, and it's and you're absolutely right. We have to find ways to work with them. But again, as you work to become more efficient and have a really tightly coupled supply chain, etc., some certainty, is so important for businesses, and in certain how governments kind of look at these trade relationships, etc. Because otherwise, it's instead of just in time, as I read somewhere, it's going to become just in case, that you end up having to do things. But
that's right.
Yeah. And you talked about technology, and I'd love to sort of probe a little more on that. How are you leveraging technology? How are you leveraging big data at CHS? And I know you had some ideas that you wanted to share with us on that.
I think we do. We've got technology that's really all over our company, and it's there's good parts that come with that, but it is also some challenges that come with it. But let me tell you some of the things that we're working on. Is technology just in the production of crops? We're much of our trade territory and much in parts of South America as well, suffering a significant drought. While the harvest is not completed, at least in the United States yet, I think it's safe to say that production is going to be much better, notwithstanding a drought, than they would have been 20 to 30 years ago. And much of that is due to the technology that has been applied to seeds by manufacturers that we support, that really has allowed for production to be maintained even in difficult conditions, because it really gets at, I think, a piece of sustainability as well. The answer to the question is that we will grow more with less water and less fertilizer. That's the answer. We have to work on the riddle. Because we know what the answer is: more food with less water and less fertilizer. And so I think, the technology that goes to help us do that, and there's a cost that comes with it, absolutely. The benefit is we have years like this where growing conditions are challenged, and our production looks to be really, really strong. A second area maybe I'd answer that question, Shri, is technology. We just built a new elevator facility over in the town of Herman, Minnesota. People on this call may not have been to Herman, Minnesota, but it's a lovely community. And it's the kind of towns we operate in. Small towns made up with wonderful people. But it's the first of its kind facility. It receives grain 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, without staffing. We can maintain safe operations. We can capture the data on what we've got on trucks and facilities that come in and out of that facility. It uses technology to minimize the risk of error. It allows farmers to do business in a way that's best for them and at a time that's best for them. But it, was a way we just could not even thought of operating just years ago. And I think so much of what we talk about is, keep in mind, is just in this. So that's with the technology today, right? And yes, it is. But you give bright people some time and some money, and they will come up with the next best way. And that's what I think gives us confidence in the future. And even for some of the problems we deal with today is we will come up with better solutions as time unfolds if we do invest the money and the time to do that.
Right. I mean, that's absolutely right. I mean, we're ourselves really trying to make sure that all of our students have some kind of exposure to technology, AI, machine learning, all the new things that are, that we're all paying attention to, apart from having, of course, specialized master's programs and certificates and so on in that area. But I would love to know, I mean, two things from you regarding the talent, because, our business is developing talent for the great companies that are in our community. And so first of all, I know it's a highly competitive market for skilled workers right now. Everyone's complaining about that. How is CHS attracting talent in this market? And a related question is, how do we make sure that the students that we are producing are, have the skills and are attractive to firms like yours to recruit?
So just a terrific question. I don't know of anybody that sits in a chair like mine that frankly doesn't spend a significant part of their day talking about talent in one way or another. It's just such a huge part of what I know I do during the day, and what I think about to make this company successful. My input to you as a leader at one of the finest institutions in the country. Keep them curious. Keep them curious. As old educators told me, don't tell them what to think, tell them where to look. And if keep them curious, because if that stops, I use the word curious, but I think it applies to learning, right? Keep learning, which I think that's this word adapt. I put being a continual learner in there, and the graduates of the University of Minnesota clearly are purpose-driven individuals. We've seen it in the interns we've had here. We've seen it in the people that come to work for us. The way that we really think about it at CHS and our attractiveness for people coming at us is when they are purpose-driven, we have that purpose. We don't have to make it up. We don't have to put fancy words around it. The work we do is noble work. We help feed people around the world. And if you want to be about something bigger than yourself, take on something like that. And that's what we're seeing people come to us. And Shreya, maybe you're seeing that in the graduates that you have a chance to visit with, is there is just this sense that yes, I want my career up to, but I want to be about something bigger than me. And I want to make sure that I'm participating in something that's bigger than me. And we have that, and companies like us have that. I think what makes our culture special, we're a hardworking group, but we are a humble group because, again, as I said earlier, we can, if you make the mistake thinking you're the smartest person in the room, likely the markets will come around and teach you otherwise. I also look to things that we are working hard at in inclusion, a core value of CHS. Look, we know that it's better for business when all are included. We know that we are a better company when all are included. And one of the ways we think about that at CHS is, yes, we work in agriculture. Yes, we work in food. But that has nothing to do with where you grew up. We have lots of people that join us who are jazzed about things like helping people around the world eat better, helping farmers that own us produce more efficiently. And they could have grown up in Los Angeles. And if they're bright, if they listen, and if they can adapt, they're going to have a great future with us. They're going to have a great future with many companies. If they stop any of those three things, that's a problem. But I think if people come at that, and we just think that there's just tremendous opportunities across all our platforms for many of these skilled positions, and including all people, wherever they come from, what they have to contribute to us is just part of our offering going forward, and we think it's a good one.
Right. Great lessons, Jay. I mean, adapt and be willing to learn, be humble, be curious. I think these are just great messages to get out to our students. Yeah.
Please, if one word I can leave you with at the university is keep them curious. Keep them curious.
I promise we'll try to do that. Keep them curious. Good. And I think in terms of the purpose that you talk about, I mean, we are very, very committed to this idea of business as a force for good. And I think a lot of the students who come out of Carlson really, believe in the sort of the need for business to have a purpose as they go forward. So I think this.
I know they do because we hire them and we have them as interns. And I talk with them. I go to the intern welcomes and receptions just so I can kind of see and talk firsthand with the workforce that's joining us. And I know that people from Carlson do speak that way.
Well, thank you, Jay. That's wonderful to hear. And thank you also for sharing your insights. I think at this point, I know there are questions from the audience. And so I will turn it over to Amy to ask some of the questions that are coming from the audience at this point.
Yes, thank you, Cherie and Jay. We've got lots of questions here from our audience. The first one we're going to throw at you is, please share the CHS view and outlook on inflation over the next several years.
Yeah, I think we've all heard the words that this is transitory. I'm not there, frankly. I don't think it's all transitory. I think the inflation that we're seeing is going to be with us. Now, I'm not smart enough to give a percentage number over the next number of years, but I think we've got to count on the fact that we're going to see cost increases, whether they be done for reasons like we've talked about on this call already, that they're going to be impacts from decisions we make, or from a supply chain that I think in some areas is not necessarily going to be better soon. And I think all of those things put together are going to lead. I don't think this parts of this inflation are as transitory as some are positioned in it. I think we're going to see some, and we're seeing it in raw materials that we provide. We see it in our ventures that we have with others and what they're experiencing. So this is not just an opinion necessarily, as much as we're seeing it in parts of our businesses. And we're not getting the feeling that this rolls back or comes off or it's temporary in nature. And in fact, we're probably being warned, you count on more.
Thank you. We had several of our guests asking about that. We have a question from Mario from Argentina, and he is asking, how strong is the cooperative movement in the US?
That's a really good question. It's really strong in some areas. For those that remember in university, the co-op house was kind of the strange house on the edge of campus. And then you got a company like CHS, which is a global company that, yes, happens to be cooperatively owned, but competes in world platforms with any other company. The point that we have that I think builds to our strength as a cooperative is what we do is to the benefit of the people that own us. And that's both in financial sense as well as ownership. Because if the people that own us, when we put a port facility up in the Gulf of Louisiana, or make an investment in Argentina, We're doing it on behalf of farmers that own us. And that gives them ownership in something they don't get anywhere else. And I think that's really, really powerful for people, that they feel they, not only do they feel they own all the way through the supply chain, they actually do own it. Then the second way is economic. You know, in the last several years, we've put out over $500 million of cash out to the people that own us. That's based on the profits that we made. And that makes a really big economic drive for people that own us to do business with us. At the same time, we've got to be able to compete, and we've got to be able to do business as well across the world. So I think I'm a firm believer in the cooperative model, that I think that it really provides value for people that that own us. But I also know that the performance that we have to deliver has got to be just as good as any other ownership model. But having said all that, the cooperative movement is strong, it's healthy, and I think it really is one of the shining stars for business models here in the US that I'm familiar with anyway.
Thank you so much. Charles is asking, how do foreign competition and employment issues in the United States economy impact your decision making?
Could you say it again, Amy? The first part of the sentence?
Of course, yeah. How do foreign competition and employment issues in the US economy impact your decision making?
So I'm not quite sure in terms of what all the question is. I mean, foreign employment issues is a big topic, right? I mean, it's everything for how business is done around the world versus how it's done here, and the talent that comes with that. Let me just take the question a little bit this way, if I'm right, is a big objective for us, and something we work hard on, is spreading the culture of CHS across the world to all our offices around the world. Because the fact is, business isn't done the same all the way around the world. But at CHS, we only have 4 values. One of those is inclusion, as I talked about, but a second one is integrity. And how we do business around the world is a big deal to us. And notwithstanding the fact that business and some business areas around the world do business in a different way, we work hard to make sure that the people that are engaged with CHS do business the right way, and do business in a way that would make us proud here in the United States, would make us proud in Argentina and anywhere else. And it's just something we work hard at developing and hard at ensuring. So I don't know if I for sure got to the point of the question, but that's a shot at it.
Yes, thank you. We're going to keep along those lines with another question from Santiago, asking, how is your current percentage of diverse employees in the corporate office? And what environment or cultural, what kind of culture would a diverse candidate join if he or she were to join CHS?
Yeah, very, very, very good question. So on our diversity across gender, roughly at about 40%, women across our 10,000. In looking at minority representation, we're down into the single digits, which is something we're not very proud of. And something we're working hard at making sure that we do attract and develop the diverse part of the workforce that we know will be our workforce for tomorrow. And we don't shy away from it. We don't do anything other than, this is an issue we got to get better at, and an issue we need to grow with. And one of the ways that we did it is we said, let's put it up in the company's values. And no better way for me to make sure that the company stays focused in development than putting it up in the values. Because I don't have much time for things we don't make progress in. And I think we will if we create that kind of visibility. So when, to the second part of the question, when somebody joins us, we're working hard at how do we make sure people feel included. Because to bring in diverse talent and then not also think about how do we make them feel included when they're here, I think is, well, I think if you don't, frankly, they'll leave. They'll leave. And so we do look at how do people join us, how do we make them feel included, and then do they stay? And we're not where we need to be as a company. We have challenges in where we operate and all of that, but we think we can do better, and we're not shying away from it, and we're not shying away from where we are and where we're starting from.
Thank you. We are getting so many questions about technology. Greg in Hawaii is asking, how do we best honor and incorporate historically significant farming practices and incorporate them into the modern technology developed practice?
It's a really good question, because sometimes they're frankly incompatible. The new technology, the new practice is just significantly different and frankly significantly more productive than what it is replacing. And the truth be told, we do have some people that try to hold on to that older technology or those older ways in the face of these changes and improvements. And that's just not the case in the US. That's the case around the world. So that's why I think adoption is going to be uneven. But I don't know that I could come down on the side of, is there specific areas that we should make sure we hold on to? I think there's approaches to how we do business. I think there's approaches to how we treat the land, how we treat the water, how we treat the air that we should hold on to, and how we do business. But if we can find ways to do it better, and I think about this not just from the aspect that maybe economically somebody does better, but we do have a world that wants to eat better. And we do have a world that we want to feed by using less water and less fertilizer and less things like that. So to accomplish all of that is going to mean new technology and new ways of doing business. So it causes one to be careful of what do you hold on to from the past. For sure, you want to hold on to things of how you do business, the integrity that you operate with, your approach to working with others, your approach to collaboration, things of that nature. But the new technology that can also accomplish some of these things of how do we grow more food with less carbon into the air, less fertilizer into groundwater, less fossil fuels used to plant and harvest an acre of land, that takes new technology. And I think that's going to be a really big part of the future.
Jay, this is probably going to be our last question, and I'm going to combine two. Tom and Jacob are asking kind of similar questions, and along exactly the lines that you were asking. They're asking about, helping new technologies, creating cost reductions and healthy farming techniques. But I think Jacob's asking specifically, are there any innovations or opportunities in that area that you're excited about? Anything specific you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, so I think, driverless technology is going to be, I think, an area that really is frankly going to attract a lot of capital to develop. Labor in rural areas, labor in smaller towns is really a difficult challenge. Much of this work is seasonal, and so keeping a labor force employed is really a challenge. I think right now some of that technology is it's driven by a lot of enthusiastic people that got to prove it and got to make sure that it can work with all the variables that come with doing business in agriculture. But I think things around labor is going to be a big portion of how can this help me do it more efficiently than in the past. But maybe just backing up from the question, when I started with the company, so that's 38 years ago, compared to today, we plant and harvest an acre of ground using about 25% of the fuel that we did when I started. 25%. We're down about 75% in my career in the fuel to plant, service, and harvest an acre. Now that's come from technology. That's come from technology in engines, and in the fuel, and in the farming practices. And I say that in the same breath as saying sales of those products by CHS have never been higher. Our market share has never been more. So it can be, a company can adapt and be really, really successful, even with all of that, if you have that kind of mindset of adapting to what the world is. So I just use that as saying the technology that we have seen gives me good confidence that the technology will continue to push us forward, because I've just seen how far it has brought us, and I believe it can bring us a lot further.
So Amy, is that the last question?
I think that's probably a good place to start. We do have one more question about what role do you think cryptocurrencies and blockchain will play in the next 5 years? Otherwise, you've done a great job, Jay.
Yeah, I don't know on cryptocurrency. I haven't figured out how that could play. I think things like blockchain in terms of taking steps out. I think that whether you call it that or you just approach your business by reducing the number of steps and kind of collapsing what used to take a lot of steps and a lot of calls and a lot of pieces of paper. If you can collapse that, I think that the companies that can do that first and maintaining data, sharing that data appropriately where it should be, is going to be really, I think, some leaders in this industry. But the cryptocurrency, I don't have it figured out.
Thanks, Jay. I don't know that anyone has. So thank you very much for that. And thank you also for sharing your experiences and ideas about, where agriculture is headed and, and the kind of talent that you're looking for as well. So thank you for all of that.